Hello from Gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and this video is part 2 of one I made earlier. Now, some people had asked me why my YouTube channel and my garden and my house were called Douentza, because it's a town in Mali in West Africa, and the truth is it's because of travels I made there a good many years ago. So this video is a continuation of the previous one, showing how Mali influenced me so much and how I came to love it and named the garden after it. Now, a word of warning: if you're only interested in plant and gardening videos, then please feel free to turn off at this point, because this video is not about gardening. And the time came to leave Timbuctu eventually. And we planned to travel by river. Now, I already mentioned how Timbuctu is seasonally connected to the rest of the country. So when the rains come and the river swells, then boats can get through. And this is one of the boats we travelled on. It's a pirogue. And here you can see lots of people going out to the boat with all their belongings on their backs. This is a view from the boat, and everybody is kind of boarding it. And people laughed at us for wearing our sandals when we walked into the water. But there was good sense behind that, because in many parts of Africa, in North Africa anyway, there's a little worm that lives in the sand at the edge of the water. And he has a parasite in him, and he burrows into your foot if you're very unlucky, and gives you a disease called bilharzia, which you really don't want to get. Here's one guy going to the shore with a load of belongings on his back, and you can see the essentials there. There's his hat, keep the sun off his head, a half calabash, I suppose for drinking or eating out of, and his sword. And that handkerchief you see on top of his head, that's to balance weight. So like people often carried things on their heads, and some kind of towel or something was necessary to just kind of cushion the weight of what was above. This is a view from inside the boat, and one of our travelling companions, a little girl here. And here's my husband in the boat there on the right. The gentleman behind him in the blue clothes is called Yuaru, and we'll hear more about him in a little while. Notice the teapot as well in the foreground. Here's Yuaru, and he looks very serious in this photograph here, but we did share a laugh or two with him along the course of our journey. Now, Yuaru was or is a herdsman, and he followed his cattle around to find the best grazing lands. So the cattle needed grass, and that determined where he travelled to and from. The tea being poured in the foreground is Tuareg green tea, and there was a whole ceremony to it. You had to draw tea by pouring it from up above, like you see the man doing in the photo, and it created a kind of mousse on the surface of the tea. And the first round of tea made in that tiny little teapot was quite strong. Bitter like life is what they said. Then more water was added to the teapot, and another round was made, and this one was sweeter, sweet like love. And finally, with the last addition of water, the tea became, well, quite insipid really, but it was said to be light like the breath of death. In any case, this tea ceremony was very important to the way of life in Africa. It took a long time to make a cup of tea. Our boat journey passed by very many interesting villages along the way, and these villagers here are washing themselves in the water. We encountered cattle crossing. Very good swimmers they are too. And here's another village we passed by on our way down the river. But, and now I want to tell you a very frightening thing that happened to us. It was the middle of the night and we were asleep on the boat, pitch dark, when we were woken up to shouts and cries and people jumping off the boat into the water, which was all really alarming. And people started yelling at us and telling us to do the same, to jump into the water. Now, we'd no idea what was going on. There seemed to be a storm brewing, and people were speaking in their own languages. We couldn't understand what they were saying. We'd no idea how far we were from the shore and what indeed the danger was. But everybody started doing this, so in the end we decided to follow suit, jumped into the water. And well, thankfully, when we got in there, we realised that it wasn't very deep. It was, you know, like up to our thighs, perhaps. This is another thing, we didn't know how deep it was, and also that the shore wasn't very far away. So soon we'd followed everybody else to the shore. Well, no sooner had we reached the shore than everybody started disappearing. Off they went over the hill into the darkness. And we didn't know what to do. Nobody had told us what was going on. We didn't know who to follow, and we didn't know if there was a village nearby at all. And just when we were kind of wondering what on earth to do, out of the shadows stepped this man. And this man was the Imam of Douentza, the Muslim preacher, I guess, from the village of Douentza. And he said we should come with him. We were a bit dubious at first. He was a Tuareg, obviously, from the way he was dressed. And as we followed him, he started explaining that we were white, he was white, so we white people should stick together. Some of the Tuareg were quite racist. We didn't really have a choice, so we followed the man. But he brought us back to his home, which was a Tuareg tent in an encampment outside of the village of Douentza. And he brought us into his tent where we slept the night and gave us food and introduced us to his family. The ladies there are his wife and niece, I think. And the next morning, a big meeting was convened, and the Imam was obviously the head of the village. And all of the people in the village who were sick came to see us because they knew we had medicine and perhaps thought we had some kind of medical knowledge. Now, I just want to say that myself and Norman have absolutely no medical training whatsoever. But these people came and the Imam was translating what they had to say and communicating it to us. And there was a range of stuff. Some people had quite horrific illnesses and injuries. Others had quite laughable stuff. There was one teenager who had acne, which you don't see very often in West Africa, so they thought perhaps it was some dreadful illness. There was one woman who came and she suffered from intermittent blindness. In most cases, we just had to say that we hadn't a clue what was wrong with the people and there was nothing we could do. But the antiseptic and the antibiotics that we had in our kit did come in handy. Before we left, whatever medicine we had left, we left with the Imam there in the village. Now, this kind of scenario sounds ridiculous to us in the West, but it happened in several occasions in Africa, and it reminds me of what happened one time in Timbuctu, which I neglected to mention when I talked about Timbuctu in the last video. And one day when we were in Timbuctu, we were walking through the town and a child came up behind us, pulling at us to stop. And when we turned around, we saw that his leg had been ripped open with something. It was quite a horrific injury from the knee, like down to the ankle. And of course, in the heat and everything, the danger of infection was really quite great. Anyway, we enlisted the help of a passerby who spoke the same language as the child. We found a quiet corner at the side of a building and had a look in our medical kit, and the only thing that we had there was antiseptic. Now, can you imagine? This child had an open wound all the way down his leg. The agony of actually putting this antiseptic on the leg is just inconceivable. My only thought was that we're going to do this, we're going to make this child suffer terribly, and still he's going to lose his leg. Passerby explained to the child that we were going to have to put this antiseptic on his leg, and we did. And you never saw such a brave child in your whole life. Like, he really, he was really brave. Then we gave him a course of antibiotics, and obviously you have to stress the importance that you have to keep taking these antibiotics. Even though you seem to get better, you have to keep taking them until the course is finished. And off he went, the child left. It was the day before we were about to leave Timbuctu. walking down the street again, perhaps a bit hassled, perhaps a bit grumpy, and somebody runs up behind and starts tugging, and we turn around, and you know who it was? It was that child. And do you know what? His leg was visibly on the mend. You could tell it was going to get better. It was going to be okay. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment. And you know, very seldom in our lives do we get the chance to do something really worthwhile. And by chance, in that one place, I managed to do something that actually counted. And on a much lighter note, here's a close-up of the Imam's wife and his niece. And as you can see, they look very modest with these large black dresses that they swathe around them. But I have a little secret to tell you. Inside the privacy of their own tent, even with us present, myself and my husband, they went topless, completely topless. So I should explain a little bit about clothing in West Africa and why these ladies went topless. And it's important to remember that different cultures have different norms. Well, in West Africa, it's very important that women should dress modestly. And what that means is that they should wear loose clothing from the waist down. Tight trousers and shorts are, well, you know, people would be quite shocked if you went around wearing those kind of things. So you can see I wore loose trousers during my trip. Now, you can go topless if you want. It won't shock, it won't raise an eyelid, but I chose not to. Yeah, just a couple of notes on clothing. Can you see in this picture here, I have a large anklet on my left ankle, silver anklet. And it was a very heavy thing that I bought in Niger or Mali, I'm not sure which. Very heavy, and it actually affected the way you walked, which was considered rather attractive to the male. However, you should note that men in West Africa did not find Western women in any way attractive at all. And the answer is yes. I am always wearing the same clothes the whole of my trip in West Africa. I travelled light, and every night I would wash out everything I'd worn during the day and hang it up, and by the morning it would be dry and I'd put it on again and continue on. So we left the village of Dari and continued on our boat journey. And our next port of call was the Big Smoke. It was the town of Youvarou. And compared to previous villages, this really was a big place. Here we have two ladies fetching water over their heads. And here in Youvarou, we have a Moor teenager selling some cigarettes, mostly at the side of the road. Now, mostly cigarettes were sold en détail, individually. You bought one cigarette at a time. But if you look on his table there, what you also see are those kind of tins of meat with the picture of the bull on the front. And these had printed on them in large letters, gift from the UN, not to be sold, and yet they were for sale everywhere. But people didn't trust them. They thought they had pork in them, so well, because they were Muslims, they didn't want to eat them. Should they have trusted or should they have not trusted? Another thing I saw, that in some place there were bits of chickens for sale, and in fact they were cooked chickens' rear ends, and they were for sale quite cheaply. And later on I found out that toxicity in a chicken will tend to accumulate at its rear end. It can lead to cancer if you eat it, and yet these were for sale cheaply in West Africa. There's me in Youvarou, and now we're in the marketplace, and people watching again, our favourite pastime when in Mali. A world of crossing paths and different realities. The man selling hats, look at them all piled up on his head. Here are two more women from the marketplace, and notice the interesting piercings in their nose. Quite common, and the ears as well. And what stories did they have to tell? The lady on the right obviously raising her baby. She looks a bit worried, a bit fraught. In one sense we have so much in common, and in a more superficial way we can seem so different. And two more people going about their daily business and not realising that 28 years later they'd be on YouTube. And here again is Youvarou, our companion on the boat journey, somehow wearing a tablecloth wrapped majestically around his head. Very elegant altogether. We split up when we got to the town of Youvarou, and somehow we managed to find a Lebanese shop that stocked biscuits. Now, I just want to stop you there and say biscuits. I'm going to talk briefly about food in Mali when we were there, and one thing I will say is that sugar, starch, calories, oh my God, it was such a treat to find those biscuits. It was like something from another world, and it was something from another world. In West Africa, food is scarce, and when you want to eat in the evenings, you go along to these ladies at the side of the road. They have big pots, they make a big stew, and you can buy a plate full. You take what is available, not much choice, and the further north you go, the more stones and grit you'll find in the food that you eat. It's not very appetizing, and strangely enough, when we first landed in West Africa, we arrived in Niamey in Niger, and we arrived in Ramadan, which is the Muslim fast month. So everybody was fasting. There actually was no food available during the day. You had to wait till the evening. So we arrived in one of the poorest countries in the world during Ramadan. It was really badly organised. But even after Ramadan, food was scarce, and we did lose a lot of weight during our time there. But anyway, back to the story of the biscuits. Yes, I found this amazing packet of biscuits. I was so pleased with myself. We got back to the boat and met up with our companions again, among which was Youvarou, the man in the photograph there. And I decided to offer him a biscuit. So held out the packet to him. And only when I saw the look of disbelief and total joy on his face did I realise my mistake. And I realised the mistake because I'd made this same mistake one other time during the trip. In West Africa, if you want to offer somebody a biscuit, you take the biscuit out of the packet and you offer them the biscuit. If you offer them the packet, they assume you're offering them the packet. So Youvarou happily took the packet and disappeared, and I was absolutely gutted. I really was absolutely gutted. Anyway, we met up with him the next day, and he said that he wanted to thank me because the food he had tasted the previous night was the most fantastic thing he'd ever eaten in his whole life, and he would never be satisfied again with normal food. And so our boat journey on the pirogue came to an end in the town of Mopti. But I'm not going to tell you about Mopti now. I'll save that for another time. You're probably asking when on earth is she going to explain why she named her house Douentza. Douentza hasn't even come up yet, but I'll just tell you, you're on African time now. You have to be patient. It will come. The last thing I want to say is that I'm putting a link up above to a wonderful video I found on YouTube, which was recorded in Youvarou, the town with the Lebanese shop that sold the packet of biscuits. But this video was recorded 20 years after my trip and the photographs that you're looking at now. Yet in the video, it really looks exactly like I remember it. It's a wonderful video of the marketplace above. Do go and check it out. It really is worth a look. Right, that's all for the moment. I hope you liked this video and stay tuned for another installment at a later stage. That's all for now. Bye.